Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
And gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
Into the chopper!
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
There's no crying in baseball!
To infinity and beyond!
Iron Man.
Hello everybody, welcome to Film Code. My name is Phoenix Clouded, and it is a very good day. In fact, it is a great day for an exorcism, of course, and because I'm joined by a very special guest, my good friend, also in my critics group, which I always love mentioning. Welcome back, Ben Miller. Ben, how are you, man? How has it been? And it's been a while.
It's doing good. I'm glad that we actually get to talk about a movie that is not awful. Like, because last time we talked about Jurassic World Dominion, and damn it, I'm still mad. Like,
Yeah.
It's a nice change of pace to actually get to talk about a good movie for a change. Speaking of your critics group, I'm really glad I got on the ground floor, because otherwise, I had mentioned this the other day. We started letting, like, we admitted in a bunch of new critics, and everyone that came in, I'm like, man, I wouldn't have made it these days. Like, I'm really glad I got on the ground floor of this, because I am not up to these dudes' levels.
Yeah, we got a big rush of new members. That was some pretty noted names.
Heavy hitters. So I was like,
Yeah,
okay.
so
Everybody's like, they're talking to celebrities. I'm like, man, I don't know. I just talked to like some random director first time, and it's like I am like limping along on my site. And these guys are doing some real work.
yeah. So yeah, we're coming up, man. We're gonna be big. Hopefully.
I love it.
Oh yeah, super awesome. And what have you been up to since the last time we talked? Because you said Jurassic World Dominion. I think that was way back in the beginning of the season. So
yeah, that was what. Yes, I mean, I've been up to so much and so little. So before the last time we talked, I started a podcast with my brother called the Film Critic Common Man. That ended a couple months ago, and I'm starting a new one called Target Audience, where I invite guests on to talk about a film which is the target audience. I'm rolling those out weekly, trying not to get behind, because nothing worse in the world than not having a podcast and supposed to release one on Sunday. Right. So trying to write, the critic screenings are really ramping up in October and November. That's always very exciting day. So yeah, starting to get my in the year list starting to wrap up, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I went to just got back a few weeks ago from TIFF, which was a blast. Like first time ever going, so that was super fun. But yeah, I didn't realize the amount of work it is for a critic. You want to be there to enjoy the festival and hang out with a lot of your fellow critics, but like 9 times out of 10, you gotta just stop for like 3 hours and write your reviews.
Yeah, I realized that whenever the first time I covered Sundance, I was like, okay, it's like, hey, get to watch movies all the time, and then after a while, you're like, man, this is a grind. Like, it's like, well, if you ever think to yourself, oh, do I really love movies? Go to a film festival, and then after you're done, you're like, oh wow, I do really love movies. Or otherwise, like, you'll either find out you're like, oh, I never want to watch another movie again in my life, or you're like, no, this is actually what I want to do. Yeah, that's all. It's how long is my review going to be? Which one is my full one? And then your brain is on like 4 movies behind, and you're like, what am I actually supposed to write?
What am I supposed to write about? It's been so long since I've seen it. Do I even remember anything?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I get why people are taking notes during their screening. I was like, I never understood that. How do you pay attention? But then I'm like,
just keeping it all straight.
Yeah, just so you have something to refer to, so you're not.
I never do keep notes, and I think to myself, how can I ever keep all that stuff straight? And I look back and I was like, well, I did keep them all straight, but yeah, film festival. The underrated part of film festivals is the burnout. Like, it's just
the burnout is real.
You're just like, I need to find. Can somebody give me something? And all these movies, a lot of them are heavy, and tense, and you're just like, can you give me something dumb to relax and enjoy about, and not have to overthink of it? Yeah.
Well, there was some really good stuff at TIFF that I felt was like a lot lighter than a lot of the stuff, and those were kind of the movies that I gravitated towards. Yeah, props to anyone who was publishing during the festival. I think I got maybe 2 done during the festival.
Right.
All the rest came like days later.
Whenever I did Sundance, I was just like, well, if you expect full length reviews of these things are going to happen. These are going to be all 100% capsule reviews. Like every single one of them was like, you get 2 paragraphs, maybe. Like,
right. Yeah.
Cover everything, but it's not going to be full. Yeah.
Yeah. I probably should have tried that, but yeah, it was a crazy time. Yep. But yeah, you're right. If you find out that you love movies, nothing proves it quite like going to a film festival.
Absolutely.
Because yeah, especially if you're writing for it, then you'll go, do I love this? I would have to. I would absolutely have to. So yeah, good times. So now that we got that out of the way, great catch up.
Yes.
We are here to talk about the 1973 William Friedkin, in his words, masterpiece, The Exorcist. This is based off of the book written by William Blatty. It stars Ellen Burstyn, Linda Blair, Jason Miller. I think that was Jason Miller. Yeah, Jason Miller. And I'll never remember this guy's name, but he's such
Max von Sydow,
classic character actor. Yeah, dude's great. Yeah, I could never remember that. Yeah. Max von Sydow, such a great actor, such a great character actor. Yeah. So this movie, what is this? 1973.
Yep. 50 years.
50 years. This movie's 50 years old. Wow.
Yeah, 50 the day after Christmas.
Wow. Yeah, that is crazy. They released this movie the day after Christmas.
Can you and hey, fun-filled Christmas adventure. Family, let's go and check out the new movie.
Yeah, cuz nowadays they have like market research and they're like, "Hey, we have this kind of movie. What day fits perfectly with it?" And that takes time and money and research, and I'm just blown away that in 1973 they said, you know what would be great?
Right?
The day after Christmas. That's the most cynical thing I've ever heard.
It's incredible.
And I'm more just blown away that anyone would go see it. Like let's go see a movie called The Exorcist the day after Christmas.
The cool thing about it is if you look at the box office, the day that the on Christmas Day and the day after Christmas, your 3 options to watch. You could watch Magnum Force, which I think is the second or third Dirty Harry movie, or you could watch The Sting, or The Exorcist. And I was like, what do you take kids to? No wonder Sting made a bunch of money, because it's like, well, you want to bring the kids to Dirty Harry? No. Exorcist? Absolutely not. Let's go watch The Sting.
Let's go watch The Sting.
Yeah.
I guess that's brilliant. Brilliant for them. And they did end up winning the Oscar, I believe, that year for Best Picture. So beat out The Exorcist. So I guess it was a smart marketing strategy on their part. So let's talk about The Exorcist. Have you? This was my first time seeing this movie. Yes, I'm very late to this. How many times have you seen The Exorcist? What is your relationship with this movie?
So whenever I think of this, I always think of like I knew more about it, especially as a kid. I knew much more about it culturally than I knew about the actual film itself. It was one of those like The Exorcist was a thing because in the 70s, my parents were teenagers. It's like 73, both my parents were teenagers, and The Exorcist was like the scary thing for them. So it was always just they talked about it all the time. It was not something I saw a lot. And when I was a kid, it would be on TV, I had little bits and pieces, but being a kid, my parents were like, no, we're not going to watch The Exorcist. And then I think the first time I actually saw the full thing, I was probably in college, and I watched it, and I was like, and I just kind of remember it's before you're really like into like a critical mindset, and you're just kind of watching it, you're like, oh, I remember the pea soup and the head turning, all that kind of stuff. and then I think I watched it as a like right before like getting into full critical stuff. You're like, okay, this is a different type. Like you kind of have a mindset of how this movie is going about, and then you watch it and you're like, this is entirely different than how you actually expect it to be.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
and so this is probably like the fourth or fifth time I rewatched it. This time I was blown away at how patient it was. It was so the titular The Exorcism
Mhm.
has 20 minutes left in the movie.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't start like it's an hour and 40 minutes of setup. And I wouldn't take anything out. I'm like, oh, all this, like everything matters. Everything it's layers upon layers of structure and character development. There's so much going on.
Right. It's interesting to me, especially like seeing it for the first time. One of my favorite things that I love is this, like discovering a movie late, but still getting the feeling and impression that I know people got when it first came out.
Oh yeah,
That's the best. That's like one of the greatest feelings ever. And in this one, I was just watching it, and I read up on a couple of things on The Exorcist about especially how it was received, and like a lot of people were like, there was reports of people like passing out, some people like throwing up, and I'm just like, I was like, oh man, like what? And as it goes on, like you said, it's a very patient film, which is impressive for horror. Like,
absolutely.
Because right now, like especially now, we're in such a rush to get to the good stuff, right? To get to the good, juicy parts of the horror film, and like, who directed this? I forget his name.
Friedkin.
Friedkin, yeah. So Friedkin goes, no, let's build on it, and it's really small, subtle things, like Chris McNeil on the phone with like who was she on the phone with, like the post office or something? Some like small stuff where it's like, does this really need to be here? But at the same time, you go, yes, it absolutely does, because we're seeing her as a character, we're seeing her relationship with other people and how that works, and it all builds until we get to this point where your daughter is possessed by a demon. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And even like you think about like the last, okay, the actual exorcism starts. You have, Chris is in the house but not actually involved. You got Father Marin, and then obviously you have Father Karras. But like you have that hour 40 of like, okay, we're just gonna pepper a little bit of what's going on with Father Marin, but so much. You're so invested in Chris's relationship to her daughter, because she actually, you can tell she cares so much about the goodwill of this girl, and like she worries about her daughter. And then especially with Father Karras, you're just like, I know so much going on,
Right.
and everything you understood and everything that happens in the exorcism is painted by what you just watched for the last hour and a half.
Right.
I mean, it's it's funny because whenever I watch this movie, I watch it going, wow, this is really impressive. Friedkin is a madman, because if you read about all the stuff he did on set, you're like, this guy needed to be stopped. He was firing shotguns in rooms and taking people by surprise. It's like, it obviously translated to film great, but I mean, in hindsight, you kind of watch it and go, wow, maybe probably wouldn't get away with it these days.
Yeah, no, the 70s style of filmmaking.
One time, yeah.
Yeah, a little different. No, but I think the thing that I was just so taken back with, or taken away with, actually, I should say, in this movie is, we're building. I didn't realize that we were building towards this final 20-minute long exorcism, which is just insane. That's such a it's just such a good idea, right? To do it that way. But like, I didn't even realize that that's what we were building towards. But normally, like I said, this is a horror movie, and I've been watching horror movies this whole time, and we're getting little bits of I wouldn't call them action, but like definitely we're seeing how the demon is affecting
Reagan.
oh my God. What's Reagan? Yes.
Yeah.
We're seeing how the demon is affecting Reagan and changing like her behavior and all of that. What I loved tremendously was how they dealt with science and like
Yes.
how like technology and medicine, it was obviously the first go to try to help Reagan, and none of it's working. And like they do everything. They go through all the steps to see like before we go straight into like, oh yeah, obviously she's possessed and let's do an
Mhm.
exorcism. Like no, it's like we have to go to the doctor. Maybe there's something wrong with her brain. Maybe there's something, in her blood, or she's got a disease or anything like that. And I was just like, that level of patience, that level of understanding of, yeah, like obviously we're not jumping straight to the supernatural.
Sure.
Right? We're going to
We're exhausting every single possibility
right,
before we get there.
before we get there. And I think that shows not just Friedkin's patience, but also it shows like it makes it less of a horror movie in the traditional sense and more of a drama.
Yeah.
Because we're watching how it affects her mother and their relationship. We're also seeing like how this would look, I guess you could argue, in real life. Like no one would want to believe that a demon has possessed their child. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Right.
No one would want to believe that.
And not even that, like if you think about all the, the medical stuff, I think Friedkin in interviews later said all the weird stuff that happens, the pea soup, head twisting, spider down the stairs, whatever it is, said the most disturbing parts were the procedure where she has a thing in her neck and it shoots out blood. You're just like, ugh, I don't like this at all. And it's like, and this is a medical procedure, and this is actually the thing that's supposed to be happening. Like doctors aren't freaking out. You're just like, man, this is. I'm not sure if I like this.
It was brilliant. It's brilliant contrast too, because you're watching modern medicine and you're going, how's this any different? like from torture. Like there's like some sort of brain scan machine that she's in, and she's just like sweaty and like it's
yeah. She's not enjoying herself. Yeah.
It's like it's almost as bad as what the demon is doing to her, which I thought was an interesting contrast. And it does feel like Friedkin's sort of making that message that like maybe we're doing our medical procedures in a bit more of a inhumane way, which I think is a nice contrast to what the demon is doing to Reagan's body as well.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I like that too. Like even it's 50 years, but at the same time, you're like, is this what they do these days? Like, is this like, I don't know. Like, it's kind of like whenever you see a film and you're just like, oh, the TV show The Great is really good about it. And it's like, oh, I'm sick. And it's like, cool, we have to cut off your hand, or we have to, or let me cover you in hot pieces of charcoal. And it's like, well, how's that going to do? It's like, well, it's going to take the toxins out. And it's like, but it's going to burn your skin. It's like, oh yeah, it'll burn your skin. Like it's that matter of fact that like it's like how far has medical science come? And it's like in the 70s you're like, what, how old is this? Is this thing? Yeah.
It's brilliant. It's outdated tactics, but like in any other circumstance these would be perfectly fine. But it's like we're witnessing the supernatural infect this girl, and it's ineffective, and two, like, is it really this way? Like, is this how we do stuff? Like, so it was a brilliant way to like show exactly, the contrast, but also how dated modern medicine can be.
Absolutely.
But also in that first hour and 30 minutes, like we journey with Father Karras, who's going through a crisis of faith and dealing with the loss of his mother, which is all like when I tell you, like, I didn't expect this at all.
Oh sure. Yeah, you're just like, where'd this come from? I was like, where's all the scary stuff? Where's the demon possession? It's like, it's like, well, it's like you said, it's a horror movie in the sense of what actually happens. But if you're talking about, we talk about Friedkin being patient. How about his trust that the audience will go on the journey?
Oh,
Like
amazing.
his trust is like, okay, if I'm going to stick around for an hour 40, this last 20's got to pop, and it does.
Hmm.
But it's the faith in this first hour 40 that's like, okay, it's everything's going to be working for this. And
Hmm.
Kara specifically, like I was like, I remember, kind of in hindsight, like before this rewatch, I was like, I remember, the good actors, bad actors, whatever, the who I thought kind of my own personal rankings in this. Then I
Hmm.
watch it again and I'm like, man, Jason Miller is incredible in this movie. He's
Yeah.
really great because you think, oh, he's a priest who has a crisis of faith. And you're like, you kind of understand what that is. And it's like, this is a totally different way of approaching it. He's not really, he doesn't have a crisis of faith because of, because of his mother dying or whatever. It's more
Right.
just like he's burned out.
Right.
His job, he's a Catholic psychologist. Like he makes no money. He's talking to people who he can't figure things out and all this kind of stuff. And even whenever he goes in and talks to possessed Reagan, he's like, well, like I guess I can do this. It's not like he's like, I have to save this girl. He's like, yeah, give me
Right.
something to do. Like
Right.
it's a fascinating character more than anything else. Just like as much context as you get, there's still a lot under the surface.
Yeah, and I think Jason Miller plays it like superbly well.
Absolutely.
And like I love those scenes where it's him alone with the demon, and yeah, he's very much like, you could tell like he partially doesn't believe it, right?
Yeah.
Like he's like, like if you're the devil, like, break out, bro. Like, what I'm saying? Like, why don't you just
shut that door again? Shut that thing again.
yeah,
Or,
shut that thing again, or
it's
say
like,
that again.
this wasn't actually holy water, and that
Right.
kind of like, yeah.
Just-
All that the skepticism, but at the same time going like, well, this is like never letting his guard up that he's actually scared.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And playing it well up until the end where
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, okay, Phoenix, I want to tell you my favorite bit of trivia in this movie. How old is Max von Sydow when they filmed this movie?
Oh God.
What's your guess?
That's the weirdest thing. I've never seen him young, so like he's always been old in everything I've seen him in. Probably 60 something. I'm guessing.
He is 44. That is makeup.
What?
That is makeup.
What?
It's
Wow.
He is a young, smooth-faced guy. Watch Day of the Jackal. Not Day of the Jackal. Excuse me. 3 Days of the Condor. In the around the same time, he's like a suave hitman who barely says anything. He's young, smooth-faced, and you're just like, what is this? And it's funny watching this movie and then like watching Minority Report, and they're like, man, they really nailed the makeup. Like,
right.
like it's like the making him look older. You're just like, I would imagine it pigeonholed him into, he's like, oh, you're a 60-year-old guy. He's like, no, I'm in my 40s. Like, yeah, and it's just kind of like Karras. You're like, there's so much Karras, and I was like, after watching this, I was like, well, Marin's like he's the guy. And then he's gone for so much of the movie. He's right at the beginning, and then he doesn't really show up again until 30 minutes to go. And you're like, wow.
And I was a little confused by the opening. Like, what exactly? What, like, you could tell he knew something, but it wasn't coming in clear exactly what it was he knew or felt or what that was.
Yeah, and I always feel like it's the as far as the books and how it's written and all that kind of stuff, that makes sense in the context of knowing the whole story. Like, have you seen any other Exorcist movies?
Well, the new one, yes, but
okay. So I'd seen the prequel. I'd seen both versions of the prequel Exorcist: The Beginning.
Mm-hmm.
One is trash and the other is fine. It's weird that they're two of almost the exact same movies. And then I'd seen one of the sequels from the 90s. But like essentially Marin's entire thing about being a priest was like started in the middle of the desert.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of tempers that. But it's a weird thing to be like, it's like all the references to Clone Wars and the original Star Wars. You're like, well, I don't know, but nobody knows this.
Right.
Like, why is he in the desert? And it's kind of my only gripes about the movie. And it's like there's a lot of like stuff that you're supposed to know that you don't really know. Like, why is he in the desert? Why is this little thing make that bit of a difference? And so but that's probably my only gripe about the whole thing.
Right. I think mine as well. Like it definitely looks very intriguing. It's very well shot.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? And he plays it well, but yeah, it just feels like something we're supposed to know, but is never given. And then we don't see him again until the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Which is just it's an interesting choice. I don't know if that was intentional or not, or maybe they only had Max for like 2 days or whatever.
Yeah,
that could be the case.
When I'm rewatching it, I was like, "Wow, I got a lot more Lee J. Cobb than I was expecting. A lot more Detective Kimber, who's a character in the third Exorcist movie." So there's this original. Mm-hmm. They made The Exorcist, The Heretic, considered one of the worst movies in the history of mankind.
Right,
and then there's The Exorcist 3,
right,
with George C. Scott. That movie's awesome.
Right.
Go, and if you're like, I don't want to watch an Exorcist movie, go watch The Exorcist 3. Exorcist 3 is great. And it's kind of like a serial killer Exorcist movie. And Father Karras shows back up. Don't ask me how. It's a fascinating, it's a good movie. I like it. And it's intense and scary. So, but I mean, and then that as the whole story, that's one thing. But But this movie, I'm really glad the way you said the way it's shot, because I think the cinematography is just a banger after banger in this movie.
Man.
Like you say, who was it? Owen Roisman. Like, you think about whenever Father Merrick shows up to the house, and obviously that famous light showing up every time she's in the bed and it's levitating and you see their breath. They're throwing the water. Power Christ compels you. My favorite recurring thing that Friedkin does is something's happening in the bedroom. Somebody rushes in, opens the door before you see what's happening in the room. It goes on the person's face, and they're just like flabbergasted at whatever they're seeing. And then you see the wild thing you're seeing. Yeah, it's like it's a great recurring bit of editing and cinematography. Yeah. Man, the way this movie's shot.
Yeah, so I read about how the response was to this movie. And and I was like, for the most part, I wasn't really feeling it. I was like, but that's only because I knew certain scenes, 50 years later. So I'm like, okay, obviously, if I'd seen it back then, some of this stuff would have been more shocking than it is. Mm-hmm. But there is one scene that I did not know about that happens in this movie that is so disturbing. Like it is.
Is it the crucifix scene?
Yes.
Okay. See, it's funny. I had known about the crucifix scene is one of the first things I'd ever known about before I ever watched the movie, because I grew up in a really religious household, but we weren't Catholic. But everybody's like, crucifix being what it is like, I remember them like crucifix scene. I just heard that like in hushed tones, and I'm like, well, now I can't. Now I'm expecting something, and then when I first saw it, I'm like, whoa, like. Not like you say crucifix scene, you're like, well, your mind goes to all these different places. Then you watch it, and you're like, whoa, way different. Like it's not even the her cursing and stabbing herself with a crucifix, getting her mom's face and rubbing the blood, and you're just like, holy moly, like. It just takes it to a whole nother level of extreme. And I think if you don't rub Ellen Burstyn's face, like the shock is still there. But man, that took it to a whole nother plane of weird.
Yeah, like when I heard like people were like fainting and crying and passing out, I was like, I wonder what's doing it to them. Like, it can't just be the pea soup. And then that happened. I was like, oh,
Like, oh, I
that's
got
it.
him. That's got him. That's the reason.
Like,
yeah.
Yep, there it is. Like, props. I mean, the ultimate props to Linda Blair. Like,
Right.
that had to be just insane to film.
Absolutely.
Like, yeah, like I don't even know how you prepare yourself for something like that. That is insane. And she was what, 13 at the time?
Something like that. Also,
Yeah.
big props to my Best Supporting Actress nomination, personal from that year, Mercedes McCambridge. Mercedes McCambridge coming in, just being like, you know what, I'm going to smoke 3 packs a day, and I'm going to be the voice of this girl, and it's going to be awesome. And
Right.
nobody's ever going to know. And apparently, it was supposed to be uncredited, and she had to sue for credit.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, coming in, like, you said it's such a good day for an exorcism. I don't think of it in your voice. I think of it says exorcism with the croaking, like, and just what an iconic voice of everything. And you know, I kind of had to stop myself from laughing in a couple of places just because of the jokes that I always think of. It's like, like the demons talking to Father Karras, and it's like, your mother sucks in hell, and you're just like, it's like I've made that joke before, and it's kind of like, it's like, what? This is an intense scene. I need to stop. There's not laughing, like, but there's so much going on. Like it's almost sensory overload. And I'm sure that's on purpose. Like, there's so much happening.
Right.
Like, how am I supposed to keep all this straight?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not supposed to be understandable.
And you're 100% right. And like, it's chaos, and they sort of, especially for like that first hour or such, like, it's such narrative focus, and then we get into pure chaos, and it's just like, what do you do? You know, like, he puts you in a place where you sort of feel what Chris is feeling, where you're like,
well, yeah, what's the solution here?
What's the solution here?
Yeah.
Like, everything's bananas, and it's just like, and I love the scene where she's cussing someone out over the phone, because then later when you see her like snap at doctors and priests and everything, you're like, yeah, no, like, it's legit. Like it's like, it's one thing for your package to be late, but it's a whole nother thing when like no one's telling you how to help your daughter, who is literally being tortured by this demon.
Yeah, and then like the doctors are like, we could try some more tests, and she's like, I'm tired of tests. What tests are going to test? You're going to say, oh, it could be this, could be this. It's like, and every time it's not. It's like, I need an actual solution. And it's funny whenever the doctor brings up the exorcism. It's really fascinating, because I was just like, what doctor would actually be doing this? Like, I appreciate like, hey, exhaust all your options.
Right.
But at the same time, and I was like, the doctor's the ones. I kept thinking, who's going to be the ones to suggest the exorcism?
Right.
I couldn't remember, and I'm like, oh, it was a doctor. Okay, like, it's like, you know, hey, at the lazy doctor going, it's like, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's Satan. Like,
maybe it's Satan.
I like that's. I like to think now they're like pediatricians going, it's like, oh, what's wrong with this throat? It's like, you know, it could be strep, could be COVID. It's like, maybe it's Satan. Like,
could need an exorcism. You never know.
Exorcism, you never know. Like, we can take a shot. It might work.
You know what? I do think it's brilliant that it is the doctor who suggests it, because, yeah, I think they definitely put that in the minds of people who are doctors now. Like, you know what?
These people aren't taking my diagnosis. I'm going to tell them it's Satan.
You know what? Let's throw Satan in there. You know,
it's like, whatever. Get these people out of my office. I'm sick of these people. That's great. That's great.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, that was something I didn't even think of, but like, I was like, yeah, I wonder who is going to like ultimately be like, I think you need an exorcism. And I was like, it could have been someone in the house, you know what I'm saying, a friend or whatever.
Yeah, it's like, how's this priest going to come in? Yeah, so you know, that's the other thing that Friedkin does. He's patient with it. He like, oh, we're going to give her medical procedure after medical procedure, all these problems, all these doctors, all these things coming in. We're going to do every single thing. Then we're going to suggest the exorcism. It's like, it's a last ditch effort. Like, a totally different movie if like It's like that first test is like clean. Maybe it's does she need to talk to a Catholic priest? Like,
Yeah, it's a much different movie, and I feel like that's how all the other subsequent Exorcist movies have been done, where it's like oh, sounds like she's talking in another voice. We need an exorcist. Like,
yeah,
oh, okay.
it's the classic Hollywood rule. It's like something successful, and they take the wrong lesson from it.
Right.
It's like Barbie. They always say it's like, oh, obviously we need more toy movies. It's like, no, that's not exactly, not at all. We need people with clear artistic voices making a choice. Like, if you look at Barbie, you're like, this is not like, oh, the run of the mill normal thing. It's like, no, this is submersive as hell about a toy, toy, and then they're like, oh, well, obviously toys are the reason this works. No, and people watch this movie and go, exorcisms, cool. We're gonna have an hour and a half long exorcisms. Like, no, that's not what this movie made work. It's all about atmosphere, structure, and story and character. Like, yeah, taking as always, all the wrong lessons.
It amazes me that it 50 years of filmmaking, they still have not figured that out. Like, why do we keep taking the wrong lessons, guys?
It's always great because people are like, oh, they don't make original stories anymore and all this kind of stuff. It's like back in the way day, and then I'll watch all these movies from the 30s, and they're all based on plays. They're all based on books, and it's like, no, there are no original stories back then either. It's like Hollywood has always been just a mine of hell. Like, just all, like you said, Hollywood taking the wrong lessons. And The Exorcist, and that's the funny. I always kind of have to watch movies like this with kind of that tinge of like, oh, there's the cliche. There's the cliche. And
right,
No. This made the cliche.
This made the cliche.
Yeah, like this wasn't a thing before things showed up. Now it's a thing.
Right.
And you kind of have to look at it. It's hard to look through that view. It's like, I was watching 4 Weddings and a Funeral, and I was like, look at all these romantic comedy cliches. And I'm like, wait, maybe it made all these. Right. It's like trying on dresses and all these kind of stupid stuff in the ensemble. It's like, okay, well, this is where it's all built on. And this is all The Exorcist is. It's all these original ideas that for the better and worse of cinema made horror what it is.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And like, this is probably the most jealous I've ever been of a opening night audience, because I would have killed to have seen this live, like seen this on the. Oh my god! Like you said, your parents were teenagers when they saw this. I have to imagine there was some sort of like rebel spirit in the air, like. Ooh, we gotta go see The Exorcist. You know, like keep it kind of quiet and hush. Like, hey, we want to sneak in to see her. Hey, right. like, because you just know like there's something dangerous out there. It's something different, and like it's one of the sickest, darkest movies you've ever seen. It blows away everything before it. Like, yeah.
And not to mention, like, you got all the, you think of the sensibilities of the 70s.
Oh,
and
God,
like,
yes.
and like. You look at like the horror movies from like the 60s, and you have like Psycho, and Rosemary's Baby was like 4 years before this, and like Wait Until Dark and The Haunting, and Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, and you have that level, but it's not like submersive and adult. Right. This one is like counterculture to the max. You're like, man, it's like it's a combination of yes. You see it like that, you're like, I imagine in 1973, they're sitting in that theater going, man, I can't believe we get to watch this. Just because of the years and years of all the stuff that, like, you hear this little girl saying these incredible things, like incredibly vulgar, vile things, all these vile things happening. And you're like, this is unlike anything I've ever seen before. And it tinges the rest of cinema for the rest of time.
And and I just know like that, like seeing that live, like, and didn't like the Catholic Church like put out like a repudiation of this movie or something?
The Pope, in the words of Friedkin, he said, "When the Pope condemns you, you're doing something right."
Yeah, because it was like especially like if you were deeply religious, especially if you were Catholic, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, like. I know for a fact, I know a few people who were Catholic around the time that this movie came out, and their parents were like, no, like no, not even a little bit. Like, you can't see this movie. You can't look at it. You can't find out anything about it. I imagine they've seen it now and they're like, holy, oh my goodness, like my parents were right. Like
So it's funny. Apparently, they said Paula Kael, the critic, she said The Exorcist is the biggest recruiting poster the Catholic Church has seen since the sunnier days of Going My Way and the Bells of St. Mary's. Which, if you think about it, you're like, yeah, this is a little pro-cat. Like the things they're fighting against is
right.
obviously not, but like it's like reaffirming your faith, trusting your faith to defeat Satan. You're like,
right.
This is a kind of a pro-Catholic movie. It's like,
I mean, you could argue that, but then I think of how it ends, and I'm like, it didn't seem like it worked.
It's for Regan is safe and alive, and you're like, is this a good? Is it a happy ending?
Right.
It's like everybody else is dead. Like Regan and Chris are alive. Everybody else is a mess. You're just like,
right.
Okay. I mean,
I guess.
and not to mention, a priest saves the day by being possessed and then killing himself.
Mm-hmm.
It's like very un-Catholic. Like
very, very.
So I mean, apparently Muslims banned this movie. I guess because of all the stuff in the desert.
Okay,
but I mean,
that makes sense.
It's funny. I never like it's always funny to see things like this, like, and how people react to it. And me and you are good examples of, like, we grew up in satanic panic times.
Yes.
Like, which we look back on. And I remember even in the time as a kid, I'm like, this is stupid.
Yeah.
Satan, like, nobody actually loves Satan like this. It's like, oh, your friends are listening to Slipknot. They probably love Satan. I'm like, shut up, Mom.
Get out of
like,
here.
like, no. And this is just another version of that. Just a way to, it's like, oh, whatever. It's just.
Absolutely. I feel like every generation has that super subversive thing that sort of gets, lambasted and labeled as, very counterculture. And yeah, you're right. Like in the 90s, I was a big metalhead too. So I'm like, I had Iowa, dude. Like I'm like, I love Slipknot. I love Metallica and all of those bands. So like, yeah, I was called. I was like, I had people asking me like, "Are you like, what are you a Satanist?" I'm
Do
like,
you love
what?
Jesus? Yeah, it's like what? Oh, Rob Zombie. I heard he grew up in a satanic church. I'm like, shut up. Like, one, who cares? And two, like, it's always funny. Like, you look at it now and you're like, say the Satanic Temple is like the last vestige of hope in this breaking down community. It's like. When it's like, what church do you trust the most? Well, obviously, the Satanic Temple.
Right.
It's we've come a long way since the 90s.
Exactly, and even in the 70s, like, not only did you have this, but you also had Kiss, right?
You had Kiss, and they're like hot off the Mansons in the 60s.
Right. Oh yeah.
And so all that stuff's kind of like
just all clashing together and creating a really like subversive anti-counterculture, but like no one's like taking it that far. Like it's just this pisses off our parents. Like let's
pretty
do it.
Much. It's always just like, well, what this is like, my kids are not listening to me. I have to rebel against this because my kids are calling me a fascist.
Right.
So it's like, well, this is obviously the devil. It's not something I did.
Right. and this movie kind of gives you that argument. Like it kind of gave people that argument of like, well, it has to be the devil because my kid would never like.
Well, I know my little girl will never do anything like this. And obviously, that's a big theme of this film. It's it's not unintentional. As we just talked about the crucifix scene, that's not unintentional. Like she's a girl right on the cusp of. Being, it's just like, my little girl is not a little girl anymore. She's now this literal demon, and you're like, she's not listening to me. She's being mean. She's doing these terrible, baseless things this filth is coming out of her mouth, and it's like, yeah, that's essentially you have a 14-year-old daughter,
Right, right.
Like, and you know,
but what you see is Satan taking over her body. Like,
Satan taking over her body. Yeah. It's metaphor heavy. And,
right.
Yeah. And you're like, well, these, you know, I take her to the doctor, and every doctor says she's fine.
Right.
Like, I know she's not fine. She's not my little girl anymore. Man, whenever you put it in those terms, it's really black and white. Like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
Like, I have a 9-year-old daughter, and now the more I think about it, the more I'm like, oh, okay. The first chance she cusses at me, go into a priest.
Like, oh, okay, all right, I see you, Satan.
I see how it's doing. It's like, no, you're not getting pea soup for dinner. Right. No, like, so I refuse to. Yeah, we should not be having this much fun about a movie that is.
I honestly, like, when I finished it, I was like, it's one of the darkest movies I think I've ever seen. So dark,
yeah.
Like, it's just one of the most disturbing things I've ever seen. But at the same time, it really is really funny, like unintentionally.
Like I said, all the stuff, like you know, obviously the crucifix scene.
Oh,
it's but at the same time, whenever you talk about it,
right,
it's hilarious. It's like, F me Jesus, F me Jesus. You're like, that's incredibly disturbing, but at the same time, it's like I could get a laugh or two out of that, and
yeah,
like, you could frame it in this certain way. The pea soup's funny, like the snot rocket in Max von Sydow's eye. You're like, good for you, girl. Like,
you had to get that out. Good for you.
Show these boys who's boss. Like.
Oh man! And then of course, like all the things that the demon says is just hilarious.
Yeah.
I'd always heard that line, "Your mother sucks cocks in hell." I just never paid any attention to it.
And then once it you know, again, tinging it with character and the structure and everything, you're like, wow, that's really mean.
Right.
Hilarious.
But super mean. Like, yeah.
So of course, like you said, can you imagine being in a theater and she says that and you just burst out laughing? Everybody look at you like, what are you doing? Like, this is the most intense part of this movie. Why are you laughing?
Like, come on. This is one of the meanest things I've ever heard.
It's impossible. Yeah, exactly. It's like one of the meanest. Your mother's in here with us, Karis.
Right.
Like, jeez.
Oh, it's brilliant.
Great movie. Great movie.
It's so good. And like, it was funny because after I finished it, I was like, it was super dark, super disturbing, unintentionally funny, but I wasn't sure if it was great. I was like, I'm not sure if it was great. And it took me just, a couple of days sitting with it, thinking about the different aspects of it, the character work, especially the direction, which is insane. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, no, I get it. like
absolutely. Like it's hard to overlook. And like you said, the impact this had in 73, it's just shattering. The impact it has still on films all the way to this day.
Yeah. And,
most of the complaints I've heard about the new Exorcist, and now I've not seen the new one. You have. Mm-hmm. So I've heard the majority of the complaints is like, it doesn't understand what the original Exorcist did.
And it doesn't understand what the original Exorcist is, and it tried to involve the original Exorcist as well, which made it twice as bad. So it's like, maybe if you hadn't done that second step, like, it wouldn't be as bad, but yeah, it's just, no.
And it's tough for, it's kind of the, Friedkin had the advantage of his time. Like, he could do all the stuff that nobody was expecting. Now, audiences are going to be are on guard now for something to be weird and be out there. Like, oh well, back in the way, well, you're not going to kill a kid, and then as the movie goes along, you're like, geez, are they going to kill this kid?
Right.
And nowadays, you can't really surprise anybody. Like, nothing is out of nothing can be taken by surprise anymore. Essentially, like, and it's like, oh, which could be the feel of the original. It's like you're fighting a losing battle.
Yeah.
You have to be doing something on a different level in a different kind of sense. Like you look at like Top Gun Maverick, you're like, okay, we're not going to try to recreate Top Gun. We're going to steer it in a different direction in a different way and have this evolution of these characters.
Yeah.
And as opposed to we're just going to do it with the same thing and have like Val Kilmer's going to pop up. No, that's not what that's not what we do. It's a evolved story as opposed to just like we're going to have Ellen Burstyn show up. Like,
yeah, and you could tell, you could definitely note the difference too. It's like,
oh sure,
it's one thing to be like, we're gonna infuse this with, homage to the original, sure. Like, but when you go, oh no, we're just gonna take this from the original and people will love it just because it's the original. It's like nobody, nobody. It's a bad idea.
Again, Hollywood learning the worst lessons.
And keep repeating them. And like what I love so much about like this month, right? We've gone through and looked at some classic horror, right? And so like we did Psycho, we did The Shining, we did The Exorcist. I think we're doing The Thing next week.
Nice.
Yeah. So like really, really, diving deep and getting some of these things. And what I find interesting about each of these is like you could tell each of these are pinnacles of horror at their time. Like they're the game changer. They're the shifter of what the genre eventually becomes.
Yes.
From where they're at. Like I would argue Psycho is the reason we get The Exorcist.
Absolutely.
Like because it's got that same vein of like, I'm gonna go to that point you're not expecting.
Exactly. And I'm gonna take audiences where they're not comfortable.
Exactly. And they gotta live with it. And and it's like one of those things where you can't really get it today because like audiences are pretty trained at this point, but also like it goes over the edge, but then it sets a new edge.
Yeah, and
at the same time.
The interesting thing about The Shining and putting those three specifically, Psycho, The Shining, and The Exorcist, it's like it's auteur-driven horror.
Yes.
Like these are not directors who are horror directors. Not like Hitchcock, obviously, like he doesn't do a whole lot of horror. He does thrillers and like political conspiracies and all this kind of stuff. And then he goes in and does this, and then Kubrick doing the way he does and his patience with all the way he does it. And then obviously Friedkin, who came in as more of like an outsider type guy who was known for action, and he does this, and it's auteur driven horror is much more interesting to me than like just a hired gun type horror.
Right.
Like, oh, David Gordon Green's going to do his own thing. It's like, is he though? How much is the studio really on board with what?
Right. But you do have guys like you got your Ari Asters, you got your Jordan Peels, you got your Robert Eggers.
It's like they're going to go to places that you're just not expecting to go.
Yeah.
And like you, the Ari Aster being a good part of it, where it's like, I was like, oh, I'm gonna take a relatively straightforward story, and then I'm gonna twist it in these ways you just don't expect me to take it. It's like, oh, this little girl that you care about. It's like, yeah, her head's coming off, and it's gonna come off in the worst possible way. And then it's like, okay, we're in this bright Norwegian sunny side. It's like, cool, these old people are going to be crushed in a second after they kill themselves. It's like, what is going on here? It's just like, it just takes you in a direction you're not. It's audience expectation going, this, I know the beats of this. It's like, no, you don't know the beats of this. And that's a really good way to put it. The pinnacles of horror push audiences where they're not ready to go. It's a really good way to put it.
Absolutely. And I think the best succeed because of those factors. You got an auteurist director, you got a story that allows for you to push the limits of the time in particular. And what you get is just excellence that stands the test of time.
Yep.
Like, this is my first time seeing this movie, and I'm so over the moon impressed that it might be one of my favorite movies of all time now.
It's an incredible film. Just it's like you said, the impressive thing is to be able to be like, this is a touchstone at the time, it's a touchstone now, and you watch it and you're like, I get it. I get it. Yeah. It's there for a reason. And same thing whenever you watch like Psycho is kind of difficult because you're like, well, it was the 60s and they still had certain standards to be held to. But Hitchcock's still trying to subvert those standards every possible chance he gets. But at the time, again, it's nice to kind of have I'm going to put myself in the shoes of being in 1973.
Right.
And what's it like? How wild would it have been to be in that theater the day after Christmas?
Oh, I can't imagine.
Unreal how that must have been.
Like, because especially like, I'm a big lover of Christmas, right? Like, and I know this was the 70s, so Christmas music was playing in the stores since like October. Like,
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And like, just that build up. Oh my God, I'm gonna spend time with my family. We're gonna open all these gifts. We're gonna eat great. You know what I'm saying? It's gonna be a good time, right? Love and laughter and joy and all of that. And then the next day,
and you leave that theater feeling like ass, like just being like, ugh. That's a good way to
like, leave the tree up for another year, bro. Like,
where's my receipts? I gotta go yell at a desk clerk.
Oh man! All right, let's wrap this up. What is your final official rating for The Exorcist?
So, for the sake of full disclosure, I give it 4.5 out of 5, just because I have little things wrong with it. But it's difficult to say it's not 5 stars because of what a influence it is for the rest of film history, and especially horror films. So yeah, I guess technically, if I want to be the you're the a-hole critic who doesn't love anything, I'm 4.5 out of 5. But whatever.
Right. You're 100% right. That's kind of how I split it. Like, I think as a movie, it's definitely 4.5 out of 5. But I think its cultural resonance and its resonance on pop culture, especially,
absolutely.
I mean, like, there's no denying it. Like, it's a classic film. So, like, that alone, I think, pushes it to the 5. So, like, the movie itself, 4.5 out of 5, no question.
Absolutely.
But everything that it has done in the subsequent 50 years
above and beyond. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I can't believe we haven't talked about Scary Movie 2.
That's a good thing, right? Like,
well, it's funny because every time I was watching, like when she's doing that tongue thing, I think of the opening of Scary Movie 2 of James Woods making out with her and all this kind of goofy stuff, and I'm just like, oh man, that's a really good actually homage to all that stuff. Right. Yeah, but whatever.
Again, the pop culture is perfect.
Stands the test of time.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we did have a code word, but we don't have our full guest, but I don't care.
I like it.
And I got you here, man. We need a guest to figure this out. So the code word, I gave it to you. The code word was a symbol. Your movie was from 1990 to 1999, I believe. Your lead actor is a voice actor in an iconic television cartoon. Your cast features 2 popular stand-up comedians, and much like the movie we talked about today, it is regarded as a cult favorite. So, Ben, you got the floor, man. Take your best guess. What do you have for the code word?
Well, they don't stop coming, and they don't stop coming. Hey, now, you're that all-star. It's Mystery Men. I don't want to hear anybody talking about Shrek being the movie that introduced Smash Mouth to the world. It's Mystery Men, people. Okay, Mystery Men with Hank Azaria. Hank Azaria, the voice on The Simpsons, had Janine Garofalo and Ezzy Izzard in it, two very famous comedians. From 1999, cult classic, Mystery Men.
I am so proud of you, man. I am so proud of you. Yes, it is Mystery Men, baby.
We're around the same age. We know what the actual cultural impact of Mystery Men is, and anybody who says Mystery Men is not a masterpiece is wrong.
Right?
It
is beyond well before its time. Like it
absolutely.
is so genius.
And as soon as you had the code word assemble, and then I figured out it was a Mystery Man, I'm like, oh, that's a great code word. Just an excellent code word. I'm like, oh, Marvel before Marvel.
Right,
like,
exactly.
Like, yes, it's like, well, it's actually kind of funny because, like, you know, the entire idea of the MCU being that they only could use the Avengers for the characters they had the rights for, which are kind of the cast-offs, not Spider-Man, not the Fantastic Four. And so they're like, all these cast-offs had to become the Avengers, and now Iron Man's so popular in Captain America, and now you're like, Mystery Men was nothing but cast-off superheroes.
Exactly. It's brilliant. It's so brilliant. And I love this movie so very, very much. It's so funny. Like, you nailed it. Janine Garofalo, Eddie Izzard, both in this movie, like fantastic stand-up comedians. Hank Azaria, the voice of was it Apu? I think he's
Apu, yeah. That's aged well.
Yeah. But definitely regarded as a cult favorite, at least amongst those who were there to see it when it first came. Yeah. 1999's Mystery Men.
I mean, any chance you have to watch William H. Macy become a superhero who hits people with a shovel the way it should be, and Wes Studi shows up, it's great. Kel Mitchell as
Paul Rubens,
an invisible man who nobody can see, who he can't be invisible unless nobody's watching. So what am I? So every time I'm at the gym, that's my go-to thing. It's like, well, I'm like Kel Mitchell from Mystery Men. It's like, oh, can you do this thing? He's like, I can, but nobody can be here. Like,
nobody can see me do it.
Paul Rubens as a farting superhero.
Yes,
I mean, I was 13 years old when this movie came out, and it was perfect. It's
absolutely.
Like, I always think of the timeline of like, well, when was I the perfect timeline? Mystery Men and The Waterboy came out when I was 12, and I'm like, these are the two movies that were the pinnacle of cinema for me.
Exactly.
Nothing could have been better suited for a 12, 13-year-old boy than Mystery Men and Waterboy.
100%.
Yeah. Great movie. I love it.
Great movie and great guess, man. I'm so glad you were able to get that. That is brilliant. So first, I think you are our first guest to score on the leaderboard. So
I like it. I'll take it. I'll take it all day long.
We got to have you back so you can, challenge again and see if you can win it for the guests this season.
You guys are killing me, guys. It's like every time I come on, I nail the guest, and everybody else is like, like, come on.
Yeah, you got the last one too. Like that's
where. Come on, guys.
Man, Ben's good, together. Y'all.
Get it together.
All right, Ben, we're gonna get out of here. Let everybody know where they can find you, sir.
Oh, you can find me on the socials. I'm on Twitter at nebisben, on Letterboxd at nebisben, on Instagram at neb.isben. You can check out my website, icecream4freaks.com. You can follow my other writings on Film Experience and Cinema Scholars. You can find me on other pods like this one, as I am the David Thewlis of podcasting. My podcast is Target Audience. You can find it wherever you get your podcast, and on Twitter at TargetAudPod. I'm also on Blue Sky at nebisben, and the podcast is also on Blue Sky at Target Audience.
Nice. All right. And you guys can find me on Twitter, because that's what it is. At IMHO Reviews 1, that's the number 1. And on Letterboxd under PA Clouded. And as always, guys, follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Film Code Pod. And we will see you guys next week. We're out of here. Peace.